This is the story of an institutional execution in less than 48 hours. Queen Camilla went from holding the absolute ear of the king to realizing that the master keys of Buckingham Palace no longer worked for her. What she just discovered behind closed doors is that her 30-year climb to the top of the British monarchy has been entirely dismantled by the one man she thought she had finally outmaneuvered. The illusion of her absolute power evaporated in a single, quiet administrative update, leaving her with the devastating realization that despite wearing a crown, she actually owns absolutely nothing. What this video will unpack is the secret power grab Camilla attempted in the darkest hour of the modern monarchy. We will look at how Prince William uncovered her hidden paper trail, the silent and ruthless institutional retaliation that followed, and the agonizing moment when King Charles looked his wife in the eye and chose to do absolutely nothing to save her. Before you can understand the sheer velocity of Camilla's fall, you have to understand how impossibly high she had climbed and how untouchable she felt right before the collapse. For most of the 1990s and the early 2000s, she was the most despised woman in Britain. She was the shadow that had stretched across the marriage of the most beloved royal in modern history. When Diana sat across from a television interviewer in 1995 and told 200 million people that there had been 3 people in her marriage, the entire planet knew exactly who the third person was. Following Diana's tragic death, the collective grief of a generation curdled into a cold hatred that landed squarely on Camilla. She was a woman who required private security just to attend events that other royals walked into freely. But Camilla fought her way back through years of grinding, exhausting, thankless work. She married Charles in 2005. She kept her composure through public humiliations that would have shattered most people. By the coronation in May 2023, she had clawed back enough of the public's tolerance to stand inside Westminster Abbey and be crowned queen consort, without the country erupting in protest. By any metric, it was a staggering display of endurance. She had outlasted the ghost of Diana. She had elevated her non-royal children into the periphery of the crown. And most importantly, she firmly believed she had Charles completely controlled. She had built an empire on his devotion, convinced that as long as he wore the crown, her position was absolute and unbreakable. Then came the morning of February 19, 2026, the day that changed everything. Police cars pulled up outside a quiet country property, and Prince Andrew, the king's own brother, was arrested on his 66th birthday. The charge was misconduct in public office, but the reality was a state security disaster wearing a royal face. Intelligence officials had allegedly uncovered that, during his time as a British trade envoy, Andrew had handed highly classified government information directly to Jeffrey Epstein. This was no longer just a family embarrassment. This was a catastrophic threat to the survival of the institution. Inside Buckingham Palace, King Charles was paralyzed. His body was already being eaten alive by cancer, his physical toll impossible to hide. The public trust was hemorrhaging in real time as news leaked that Charles had known about Andrew's activities for years and chose silence over exposure. Into this massive vacuum of leadership, Prince William moved. He did not arrive with loud speeches or dramatic press releases. He moved quietly, decisively, and with a cold focus that left absolutely no room for misunderstanding about where power was heading. William approached the monarchy not like an heir waiting his turn, but like a ruthless chief executive who had just inherited a failing company. He demanded clear reporting structures, professional accountability, and zero tolerance for anyone creating reputational damage. But as William took control of the crisis response, Camilla made a fatal miscalculation. While the palace was scrambling to cut every visible connection to anyone touched by the Epstein scandal, Camilla picked up the phone. She called Sarah Ferguson, the ex-wife of the man who had just been arrested, offering comfort and loyalty to a woman whose name was scattered throughout the unsealed Department of Justice files. For Camilla, this was a display of personal loyalty, a friendship dating back to the 1970s that she believed existed above the rules of the institution. She thought her crown made her immune to consequences. When word of that private call reached William, it did not read like a mistake. It read like a direct challenge to his authority and a staggering exploitation of the king's weakness. William understood immediately that the crisis threatening to consume the monarchy was not only coming from outside the palace walls. Part of it was sitting right beside the king, attempting to run a shadow court. The forensic proof of the shifting power dynamics was already visible to those who knew where to look. Camilla's arrogance had been quietly building for months. During a state visit by Donald Trump palace staff, witnessed an incident that spread through courtier circles like fire. Camilla allegedly gestured at Catherine, the Princess of Wales, to leave the room during a private exchange. Camilla felt she was the apex power, but the reality was a devastating contrast. During that same visit, Donald Trump spent most of his time directing his conversation exclusively toward Catherine, leaving Camilla at the edge of exchanges she was supposed to be leading. Catherine was magnetic in a way Camilla simply was not. Catherine was taking her rightful place, managing the Andrew crisis behind the scenes with legal advisors, painting the picture of her future reign so boldly that it actively shoved Camilla out of the frame. William was not going to tolerate Camilla's insubordination. In late February 2026, he executed a silent institutional retaliation. He bypassed the traditional courtiers and delivered an ultimatum directly to Camilla. He informed her that the only strategy moving forward was the total and immediate separation from Sarah Ferguson, with no gray areas and no exceptions. He told the sitting queen consort that there was no room for private loyalties, and that anyone who brought scandal to the monarchy would be permanently removed regardless of their title. It was a masterclass in weaponized restraint. William did not scream. He simply used the administrative protocols of the palace to close the net around her. Camilla, absolutely livid at being spoken to like a junior member of staff by a man who was not yet king, went straight to Charles. She demanded that her husband put his son in his place. She demanded the protection she had spent 30 years earning. This is where the story changes forever. Charles, the man she had sacrificed decades of her life for the man for whom she had endured public destruction, looked at his wife, looked at his son, and chose William. The king offered Camilla no protection. The silence from Charles was a psychological betrayal that snapped the trap completely shut. In that suffocating moment, Camilla realized that what looked like a routine transfer of duties was actually the total dismantling of her empire. She was trapped in a palace where she suddenly held no leverage, staring at the terrifying reality that her entire future now rested in the hands of a prince who had never forgiven her. The silence of King Charles in that room was not merely the failure of a husband to protect his wife. It was the formal, institutional surrender of a monarch. The man who had moved heaven and earth to validate Camilla. The man who had challenged the Church of England defied the public and exhausted the patience of his own mother just to place a crown on Camilla's head. Now sat quietly and let his son dictate the terms of her existence. For Camilla, that silence was the psychological climax of a 30-year war she suddenly realized she had lost. Charles was not simply choosing his son over his wife. Charles was acknowledging that he no longer possessed the power to protect her, even if he wanted to. He had already handed the keys to William, and now Camilla was locked inside with a prince who was holding her completely accountable. To fully grasp the staggering reality of Camilla's defeat, you have to look past the velvet ropes and the state banquets and examine the cold forensic financial architecture of the British monarchy. This is where the illusion of absolute power crashes into the brutal reality of commercial desperation. When the public looks at Camilla, they see a queen surrounded by castles, priceless art, and sprawling estates. But behind the administrative curtain, the truth is entirely different. Camilla owns absolutely nothing. When Charles ascended to the throne in 2022, the Duchy of Cornwall, a billion-dollar real estate empire that generates the vast majority of the royal family's private wealth, passed automatically and entirely into the hands of Prince William. William controls the private money. William controls the leases. William controls the discretionary funding that sustains the sprawling, luxurious reality of royal life. Charles receives the sovereign grant, which is strictly audited taxpayer money used for official duties, but the private untethered wealth now belongs to his son. This means that Camilla is living in a state of absolute fiscal dependency. She does not hold the deeds to the palaces she sleeps in. The staff who pour her tea and manage her schedule are ultimately paid through structures that William will soon inherit completely. If Charles were to pass away, or officially abdicate, as the private rehearsals highly suggest Camilla's commercial reality becomes devastatingly clear. She would be a widow relying entirely on a financial settlement and property arrangement dictated by William and Catherine. She cannot retreat to a royal estate without their permission. She cannot access the royal helicopters or the security details without their administrative approval. What looked like a personal disagreement over a phone call to Sarah Ferguson was actually the moment Camilla realized she was a tenant in an empire owned by her enemies. That fiscal reality perfectly mirrors the institutional shift happening in plain sight. With Charles retreating into his cancer treatments and William holding the administrative reins, Catherine is actively redesigning the new order. The subtle shifts in protocol are carrying devastating, deeper meanings. Royal insiders have noted that scheduling for major royal assets, the logistics that dictate who goes where and with what level of prestige, now flow directly through the Prince and Princess of Wales's offices. Camilla is no longer setting the agenda. She is being managed by it. There is a specific visual humiliation woven into this new reality. It is not the loud, dramatic confrontations you see in movies. It is the quiet, weaponized application of protocol. It is the realization that when Camilla and Catherine are in the same building, the gravitational pull of the entire institution shifts toward the younger woman. Catherine does not need to raise her voice or demand respect. She possesses an effortless authority and a fiercely protected public image that Camilla could never buy, no matter how many charities she sponsored. Catherine is wearing the sapphire ring that once belonged to Diana, moving flawlessly through the diplomatic circles and crisis management meetings, effectively acting as the true matriarch of the institution, while the actual queen consort is sidelined. This is where William's silent, enduring grief for his mother transforms into a perfectly executed retaliation. For decades, William watched Camilla erase Diana's legacy. He watched her push her own non-royal children into the spotlight, attempting to overwrite the history that had broken his family. He never complained publicly. He never wrote a tell-all book. He stayed within the system, mastered the rules of the institution, and waited until he held the absolute highest ground. Now he is not banishing Camilla. He is doing something far more agonizing. He is making her irrelevant. He is forcing her to watch as the legacy of his mother is restored and elevated through his wife, while Camilla is reduced to a dependent who must ask for permission just to maintain her lifestyle. The abdication rehearsals, currently taking place behind closed doors at Buckingham Palace, are simply the administrative paperwork for a transition that has already occurred. The world will eventually see a grand, dignified ceremony. The cameras will capture Charles stepping down with grace, citing his health, a reason the public will accept with deep sympathy. Camilla will be photographed smiling, wearing a beautiful coat, standing dutifully by his side. The press releases will praise her years of service, but those who know how to read the silent language of the palace will see the truth. They will know that behind the forced smiles and the perfectly choreographed exit, Camilla is walking out of the side door of history. Her 30-year gamble to secure the ultimate power ended the moment William realized he held the checkbook, the properties and the absolute loyalty of a public that had never truly forgotten the past. Camilla thought she was playing a game of crowns, but William was playing a game of institutional survival. And in the end, the trap snapped shut so quietly, she did not even realize she was caught until it was far too late. Thank you for watching this deep dive into the shifting power dynamics of the British monarchy. If you found this forensic analysis compelling, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below on how you think William will manage the institution moving forward. We will see you in the next video.